Om Amen. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om Amen. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. May that be the truth of our being. Well, what a lovely crowd we have this evening. I see Ms. Cindy has joined us. So if I'm not mistaken, we are starting with a poem titled, Hey. Is that correct? Page 82.
Did we already do Huddled Beneath the Sky on 81?
I thought we had, but if we haven't, let's do it.
I don't remember. I had stopped.
We didn't do it.
Okay.
We didn't do it. Oh,
No, you and I talked about it. Just you and I did the other day. So you're probably,
okay.
but yeah.
Well, then, by all means, Cindy, why don't you read that wonderful poem, Huddled Beneath the Sky? Is that okay?
Yeah, I was stuffing my face.
I just finished doing that before we signed off.
Okay. All right. This is roomy still, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, I just lost my place. Okay, hold on.
Page 81.
Okay. It's called Huddled Beneath the Sky. The sadness I have caused any face by letting a stray word strike it. Any pain I have caused you, what can I do to make us even? Demand 100-fold of me, I'll pay it. During the day, I hold my feet accountable to watch out for wondrous insects and their dwellings. Why would I want to bring horror into their extraordinary world? Magnetic fields draw us to light. They move our limbs and thoughts, but it is still dark. And if our hearts do not hold a lantern, we will stumble over each other, huddled beneath the sky as we are.
Mm.
I'll read it again.
Please.
Huddled beneath the sky. The sadness I have caused any face by letting a stray word strike it. Any pain I have caused you, what can I do to make us even? Demand 100-fold of me, I'll pay it. During the day, I hold my feet accountable to watch out for wondrous insects and their dwellings. Why would I want to bring horror into their extraordinary world? Magnetic fields draw us to light. They move our limbs and thoughts. But it is still dark. If our hearts do not hold a lantern, we will stumble over each other, huddled beneath the sky as we are. So one of the things that I mentioned the other day, I actually brought this to Brother Shankar's attention, and because I had read this poem quite a few times before, but part of it hit me in a certain way, which is let's see, the next to the last or however it's set up anyway, that says magnetic fields draw us to light. They move our thought. Wait, I'm missing some of the page. Oh, what's going on here? Oh. Magnetic fields draw us to light. They move our limbs and thoughts. And that struck me as being the gunas, which is something we talk about in Vedanta, which are, well, Brother Shankara can explain that better for anyone who needs an explanation, but I think that's what it's talking about, so to speak. But that it is still dark. You know, that there are these forces that basically are sort of operating the universe and moving our limbs and thoughts, but we don't really, even though if we know that or believe that, we still don't get it. And so the dark, it is still dark. The darkness is just ignorance.
Yes, these forces that the divine presence uses to manifest and control the universe. The first thing that is said is they draw us to light. But then Rumi says, but it is still dark. So if our hearts do not hold a lantern, we will stumble over each other, huddled beneath the sky as we are. Just that last line, just absolutely.
Yeah. For me, that's, you know, if we don't have love and compassion in our hearts for each other, stumbling, you know, we're huddled beneath the sky in this ignorance, or, you know, and if, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I just interrupted you.
That's okay, go ahead.
Well, you know, the poem starts with that, what for all spiritual traditions is the prime directive, and that is be harmless. Don't do harm to others. If a stray word has caused you any pain, struck you, what can I do to make us even? Demand of me 100-fold, I'll pay it. So that he starts with that. And then just at the end, he says, we have to hold a lantern or we will stumble over each other. We will do one another harm. Huddled beneath the sky as we are. Anyone else have anything to say about this lovely poem?
So, Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
does the I in the poem refer to Rumi, the saint poet, or something else? The sadness I have caused, what can I do to make us even? During the day, I hold my feet.
I think that's Rumi speaking for himself. Yes,
Okay.
that's how I read it. As I say, there is no correct answer when it comes to poetry, as far as I understand it. There is no. So we understand it as our hearts and minds understand it. But it certainly seems to me that he's talking about that prime directive and how he holds himself accountable for anything he does to you, and that he doesn't even want to harm an insect in their extraordinary world. And indeed, if you peer into the world of insects, it is indeed an extraordinary world. Even the world of plants, I say even the world of plants, my sister would give me a look. The world of plants is also an extraordinary world. So, anything from anyone else?
Well, a couple things. I wondered also, Swam, about the I, if that was Rumi speaking to the animals or like the animals speaking to the animals. But so, um, and then it just struck me as, when he says during the day I hold my feet accountable to watch out for wondrous insects in their dwellings. I mean, just the profound awareness and kindness, that most people want to squash an ant or a bug. I mean, or a cockroach would be my number one thing I want to squash. But yeah, just the profound, I don't know.
Well, that's why the poem, the way it ends, moves me so.
Yeah.
Because he isn't just talking about the other human beings. He's talking about the other beings that exist in this manifestation with us, including these insects in their extraordinary world. So huddled beneath the sky as we are. I just love that word, huddled. Indeed. There's a poem that ends this way. Holding our hearts out to each other for inspection rather than our fingernails, we manage to get at least a good night's sleep. Peep, peep, chirp, chirp, woo, woo. Holding our hearts out to each other for inspection rather than our fingernails, we manage at least to get a good night's sleep. Peep, peep, chirp, chirp, woo, woo.
Hard as it is, I mean, we don't obviously deliberately want to hurt the some of the insects, but I mean, if the cockroaches come in and we cannot safely get them out, sometimes it is hard, to not hurt.
Well,
Not
the
of
thing
a,
is, we mustn't think that Rumi is giving us doctrine here. No, he's not. He's not giving us doctrine. That's not what poets do, as I understand it. He's simply saying how difficult it is to be harmless in this world. If I've let a stray word cause you pain, and I'm careful of my feet so I don't, I, but then he ends this poem, huddled beneath the sky as we are, in the darkness, because we have not yet let those magnetic fields pull us all the way into the light. And here's one of those poems. Each of these poets has these poems that point toward God alone is the doer. And that's magnetic fields. Lines are about that. As Cindy said, it sounded to her very like this idea of the gunas, the three forces used by the Divine Mother to manifest the universe we share. Anything from anyone else?
think I kind of agree with this, with Cindy and you, Brother Shankara. And also, I thought if our hearts do not hold the lantern, I kind of absorbed it as if we don't move from ignorance to higher level of spirituality, we will stumble over each other. That's what I was kind of thinking in that line. I mean, it's pretty much the gunas and higher level of spirituality.
In the darkness.
Yes, we will be in the darkness.
We are in the darkness, he says, in
We
the dark.
move to the light.
So
See,
if our hearts don't hold out a lantern,
yes,
hmm,
that's moving to the, that's what I thought. Higher level of spirituality from ignorance. Thank you.
thank you. Anything else from anyone? All right, I guess we can move on to the next one, which is titled simply, Hey. The grass beneath the tree is content and silent. A squirrel holds an acorn in its praying hands, offering thanks, it looks like. The nut tastes sweet. I bet the prayer spiced it. The nut tastes sweet. I bet the prayer spiced it up somehow. The broken shells fall on the grass, and the grass looks up and says, Hey. And the squirrel looks down and says, Hey. I have been saying hey lately too, to God. Formalities just weren't working. Hey. The grass beneath the tree is content and silent. A squirrel holds an acorn in its praying hands, offering thanks, it looks like. The nut tastes sweet. I bet the prayer spiced it up somehow. The broken shells fall on the grass, and the grass looks up and says, Hey. And the squirrel looks down and says, Hey. I've been saying that. I've been saying hey lately too, to God. Formalities just weren't working. Once again, that wry smile from Rumi, that wry sense of humor, so sweet.
I think two things strike me in this poem. One is again the visualization of the squirrel holding the acorn in its hand, in its praying hands. I mean, that is so visual because it is when it's the squirrel is holding it. It is like a prayer. And the second thing is, I think your Scrooge talk is still so fresh in my mind. I'm thinking, the conversation between the grass and the squirrel,
Mm-hmm.
sort of like Fred and Scrooge. Fred not wanting to be part of the quarrel because
Mm-hmm.
the grass was silent, and when the shell fell on it, it says "Hey," kind of like startled.
Mm-hmm.
The squirrel looks down and says calmly, "Hey," like more like a friendly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the picture that I'm getting in my mind.
I think that's very right. Yeah, there's no quarrel gets started. The grass, just as you say, seems to just be startled by the shells falling on it. So it says, "Hey." Fred and Scrooge. Yeah, that's a great moment in that film where Fred says, "We've never had a quarrel that I've been any party to."
Speaking of Fred and Scrooge, I was thinking about that today, and I was thinking Scrooge had something. Let me back up. Let me retreat and start over. I'm not sure enough attention is given to Fred.
Mm.
because Fred, first of all, is the carry on from his mother,
Hmm.
died giving birth to him. But Fred is the only person who really genuinely continued throughout to love Mr. Scrooge, no matter what, and have compassion for him. And that was steadfast.
Hmm.
It wasn't bothersome. He didn't go and wave it in his face all the time, but he was very clear about it too, to Scrooge, to his uncle.
Yes.
And it really struck me today that how important that is for people like a Mr. Scrooge to have that kind of turnaround. Would it have happened without a Fred in his life?
Very well said.
Huh.
Very well said. Hmm. Yeah.
Because, just even with this poem, it's like anybody that would just the least bit annoy Scrooge, he'd go, "Hey."
Exactly.
Fred was just the epitome of hey.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
Yes. For those of you who don't know what the heck we're talking about, the talk from here yesterday morning was about the film A Christmas Carol, or more familiarly known as Scrooge, which is Charles Dickens's story of Ebenezer Scrooge, and through the intervention, through the love of another friend, another person, uh, is visited by three spirits, three spiritual guides in one night, and transforms from being a wretched old sinner to a man who knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man possessed the knowledge. There's a wonderful film that you can watch for free on YouTube. It was made in 1951. It's a black and white film, really, really, really well done, that stars an actor called Alistair Sim. And he managed to capture that character of Scrooge, both the wretched before and the joyous and heading towards sainthood kind of character that he became. And it's a remarkable story. And according to the scriptures of our tradition, such a thing is called, it can happen, and it's called transformation or perfection through the grace of God. Kripa, kripa, grace, kripasita, perfection through the grace of God. So anyway, that's what Cindy was talking about. And there is a parallel with the grass and the squirrel here. The squirrel could have been grumpy back at him. Instead, he just says, "Hey." Anything else about the wonderful poem we just read?
The other thing that comes to my mind is the nut tastes sweet. I bet the prayer spiced it up somehow.
Mm-hmm.
When we do the Brahmarpanam before, we eat our meals,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why at the center or any place, when after it's offered to God, the prasad, the offering always tastes so much better than the same thing tastes, without it.
Yes. The world doesn't change, we change. And when we practice prayer, when we practice our sweet relationship with the divine, something happens to us that allows us to appreciate the world in a very different way, which is so reflected in these poems throughout this book. All of these poets talk about the beauty, the deep satisfaction and joy of being in the world, alive in the world, if indeed you are in that frame of mind. Anything else about the poem? Hey.
Well, it's a lovely poem, and it just makes me smile and laugh, as
Yes,
so many
yes.
of Rumi's do. I just, which of course, again, we need so much of, it's so good to have that in our lives right now.
Oh, yes.
Just about the food thing too, the praying and all that. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but like even just sharing a cup of tea with a friend or friends, I can put my teapot on at my house, have that same tea, and it tastes so much better at my friend's house than it does at my house alone. So I don't know if it's the company or the community, the communion of all that, but that happens to me. I don't know if y'all notice that.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
yes, indeed. And Heidi, it's because your hearts are holding out a lantern to one.
Oh, yes, yes.
You're bringing more light into the situation. And so, as I said, the tea doesn't change, you change. And so your appreciation of it is automatically enhanced. Yes, I agree entirely. I agree entirely. And I really like what Swayam said. When we do offer our food to the Lord before we take it, and then we take it as the Lord's, and in Sanskrit the word is prasad, which means, roughly speaking, gift from the Lord. It's different.
And also, as Swami Yogeshananda used to say about the prasad chocolate that he always had in the shrine,
Uh-huh.
that prasad has no calories.
Yes. You know where he got that, don't you?
Or
He got
no.
that from Swami Prabhavananda.
Oh, did he really? Okay.
Yes,
That's right.
yeah. So Swami Prabhavananda, after we had one of those rituals, the worship services, and there would be the sweets afterwards. And Swami Prabhavananda would be encouraging people to have another piece of pie or cake. And he'd say, "Oh, please, go ahead, go ahead. Remember, prasad has no calories."
I'm happy to know where he got that from.
Yeah.
Yogeshananda.
Well, it was said of Yogeshananda that if you wanted to bring him to tears, just get him started talking about Swami Prabhavananda. But we're leaving poor Heidi in the
Sorry.
in the dark here, talking about these personalities. These are people, Heidi, that are very dear to us in the lineage that we are part of.
Oh, it's totally okay. I love to hear about it, so.
Good.
So now I'll just translate that to all of my holiday sweets and goodies because they were made with love. They have no calories.
That's right. That's right.
Can I borrow that? Yeah.
Yeah, you may. And first made with love and then offered to the Lord. The offered to the Lord is the part where the Lord takes the calories. Anything else
Yes.
about the poem? Hey.
No, but I was going to make a comment about Swami Yogeshananda.
Yes.
Every time I visited him, he would invite me to his room, and he always kept a box of chocolates and always offer that. Pick what you want. Pick the one that you like the best out of the whole box. It was so sweet.
Yes. And in California, they have a kind of candy, sell a kind of candy that usually the swamis have, because people give it to them. It isn't that they go buy it. The people give it to them. It's See's candy.
Yes, exactly.
S-E.
They don't have seeds candy here? I guess not.
Only at the airport. You can buy it at the little kiosk at the airport, but it's the only place I've ever seen it here. I've tried to find a See's candy shop here, and I can't.
Because I
Oh,
lived in
yeah.
California for 8 years, so I know we had a lot of seeds candy there. Yeah.
There's great candy here, no two ways about it. But See's candy is extraordinary for a commercial brand of candy. Anybody else want to say anything about the poem Hey before we move on?
I don't know. I got a feeling that I read someplace also that be humble like a blade of grass. So that's the thought that came to me when you read the poem, that grass is at the bottom, and everybody walks on the grass. And
Yes, that's from Chaitanya's prayer.
right.
Be humbler than a blade of grass. Be patient and forbearing like the tree.
Right.
It's instructions to the beginning spiritual aspirant. So Heidi, would you like to read Can You Become Such a King?
Can you become such a king? I want that king of grace from
Kind.
God.
I want that kind of grace.
That kind of grace. Okay. I want that kind of grace from God that when it hits, I won't get off the floor for days. And when I finally do stagger into a semblance of poise, I will still need a cane and shoulder to help me walk. And I will need great patience from any who try to decipher my slurred speech. You should forget about knowing the friend unless you are willing to kiss the world with great abandon. Locked like a pair of dogs, openly making love in the streets, impervious to shouts and pails of water being thrown and glares from eyes that pass. Can you become such an egoless king? Read it again.
Please.
I want that kind of grace from God that when it hits, I won't get off the floor for days. And when I finally do stagger into a semblance of poise, I will still need a cane and shoulder to help me walk. And I will need great patience from any who try to decipher my slurred speech. You should forget about knowing the friend unless you are willing to kiss the world with great abandon. Locked like a pair of dogs, openly making love in the streets, impervious to shouts and pails of water being thrown and glares from eyes that pass. Can you become such an egoless king?
The only thing that I don't really don't really understand is the king part. Can you become such an egoless king? And the rest of the poem, I don't see it talking about someone who's a king or kingly anyway. Maybe I'm just dull tonight, but otherwise I love it.
Mhm.
Drunk with love.
Yes, a rare and precious state.
I guess I'm still stuck on the Scrooge thing because the first and second paragraph to me describes Scrooge's behavior after he got the grace.
Very
Running
good.
down and,
Yes, yes,
and the housekeeper running away in, surprise. She didn't have the patience to decipher his speech and
yeah,
behavior. And the whole thing brings that scene to my mind.
right. Yes, it's very like that. He was in that ecstatic state of being in love with life for the first time, perhaps in his entire life, and it's such a glory to see. I think the king is, for this, speaking to what Cindy said, for me anyway, the king is just a metaphor for someone who's at the top of the game, you know, not answerable to anyone, because he definitely talks about not being answerable to anyone, like the dogs locked in their amorous embrace. You know, you can throw, and this is a fact, you can throw pails of water on them, you can glare at them, you can shout at them, nothing. They're completely absorbed. And it's only a king in our human world that seems to be impervious in that way. At least it was when kings were what they were when Rumi was writing. Anyone else have anything to say about this?
Sri Ramakrishna was a perfect example of someone who, dealt with the world with great abandon. I mean, everybody thought he was crazy and did all sorts of things to him when he was
Yes,
in love with the Divine Mother.
yes, exactly. And yet, what was his sole aspiration? This is the only time you hear him say an out and out aspiration. He said, I want to be the king of the devotees. I want to be king of the devotees. And so he became, from our perspective anyway. You know, this is the first two paragraphs are just, I want that kind of grace from God that when it hits, I won't get off the floor for days. I mean, so he's not saying this is something we generate ourselves. You know, this love, this abandon. He says, I want that kind of grace from God that when it hits, I won't get off the floor for days. And when I finally do stagger into some semblance of poise, I will still need a cane and a shoulder to help me walk. And I will need great patience from any who try to decipher my slurred speech. Well, I think Rumi was speaking from experience. I think he'd had that experience. I think he'd been there. And then he says you should forget about knowing the friend, the divine presence, unless you're willing to kiss the world with great abandon. But he isn't saying to do it willfully, like, you know, I'm going to do that. No, he says it's a grace that comes from God. So he's not giving us instruction here, except in saying, if you want this, if you want to be that kind of egoless king that comes at the end of the poem, you need to want that grace from God. And of course, this is a state that is known to saints, but very few others. And it's questionable in an ordinary life. By that I mean a life of someone living in a home with family and children. What would happen to you if you became such a person? They'd take you to the doctor. And they wouldn't, like the joke, say, yeah, don't cure her because I like her that way. Anything else before we go on? We've got time for one or two more, I think.
Next one's a bit of a long one.
Well, I'll read it.
I'll read it.
You go ahead then.
Unless you want to read it.
No, go right ahead.
Because you've been reading stuff a lot. Okay. Ooh. It is called Deceive Our Glory. Something inside said I was a mineral, and I was so glad to just be. I replied, I'll take that job. It sounds like fun. But after eons, roots appeared on my soul that wanted to nurse from a warm body, and the wonder of her love, the tenderness of the earth lifted me into the air, and I beheld light and praised it from the fields. Time sculpted my senses, and another song I heard. You are more than plant, you are like those extraordinary beasts. So I believed that, and roamed. But then I started thinking, what is my real truth? I became the wings on falcons and angels. I flirted with God in the sky. And I believed that he, once in a while, kissing me, would be as close to love as I would get. But now I know all words and images deceive our glory. Read again. Something inside said I was a mineral, and I was so glad to just be. I replied, I'll take that job. It sounds like fun. But after eons, roots appeared on my soul that wanted to nurse from a warm body, and the wonder of her love, the tenderness of the earth lifted me into the air, and I beheld light and praised it from the fields. Time sculpted my senses, and another song I heard. You are more than plant, you are like those extraordinary beasts. So I believed that, and roamed and roamed. But then I started thinking, what is my real truth? I became the wings on falcons and angels. I flirted with God in the sky. And I believed that he, once in a while, kissing me, would be as close to love as I would get. But now I know all words and images deceive our glory. This makes me think of, I don't know, remember which yoga book it is, but one of Vivekananda's, where he talks about the potential that is in everything, and it starts as this, tiny thing and evolves and evolves and evolves, and this is talking about that kind of evolution.
Yes,
Um,
it's in the Jnana Yoga book.
yeah, okay.
And it is said that a realized soul, an illumined soul, remembers. We don't remember sitting here. I don't remember. I can assume that most of us don't remember our past. We have hints and allegations, but it's said that an illumined soul remembers it all. And that's what came to my mind when I read this poem, that Rumi had indeed remembered back before he was anything other than a mineral. He remembered clear back to that. And then he said, eons passed, and roots grew from my soul. And so he became a plant. The earth, he nursed from the earth, and the earth lifted him up as a plant. And then the beasts, and then the birds of the air. And he ends up saying, but all words and images can't begin to express our glory. That's how I heard this poem. Anybody else have a very different, and I'm sure there are very different interpretations that could be made of this poem.
I'm not sure if what I feel is different, but I think what strikes me is the last but one paragraph seems like it represents Ishvara, and the last sentence represents or is like Brahman.
Okay, well that makes very much sense from the tradition we share. Swayam, I agree. To translate for people who don't know those terms, Ishvara is God the Father or God the Mother. Ishvara, Ishwari, that which manifests all of this. And so when he says, and I believe that he, capital H, he, the God the Father, once in a while kissing me would be as close to love as I would get. And then he talks about, but now I know all words and images, including those that we have of God the Father and God the Mother, deceive our glory. And that's this idea of Brahman, which is beyond all description. It is in the Jewish, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, particularly among the Jews, there is that idea of God, that way of being with God that is cannot be spoken. The name of God in that frame of reference cannot be spoken. So we have, and I think so. That's what Swayam is referring to, and I think there's reason to hear it in that way. But I'm sure there are other interpretations as well. Anyone else have something they'd like to say about it? It's quite a poem. And clearly it's about evolution, the evolution of an individual soul.
Yes, Brother Shankara.
Yes, Aaron.
I was actually thinking the other day of how an illumined soul probably wouldn't really care that much about his like past lives, or I mean, he would, like you say, if he could see all his past lives, or maybe like he would be more interested in the present moment. I don't know.
Well, that very well is true, but Swami Prabhavananda, who my teacher, who pretty much everyone agreed was a realized soul, did speak about his past lives. It wasn't that he was interested in them so much as it was just, he didn't dwell on it, but it was known to him. Let's just put it that way. And he did remark on something, but I'd have to go into a bunch of details that wouldn't make much sense to the others here, so I won't go. But he did remember. But as you say, Aaron, their absorption is in the present moment, otherwise they couldn't be illumined. It is the it is the escape from time, space, and causation that is the definition of illumination. So to be perfectly in the present moment is not to be within time, space, and causation. Heidi, can I be so bold as to ask you what you thought about this poem? And if you don't want to answer, of course you don't have to.
No. Well, I mean, I see the evolution part, that was discussed. I see that. I mean, I just think at that first sentence, something inside said I was a mineral. I mean, I just love how he says stuff like that,
Yes.
I mean, it's like, where does he get that? That just strikes me. And I was just glad, and I was so glad to just be. I replied, I'll take that job. It sounds like fun.
Yeah, I did.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I it's a lovely poem.
I put you on the spot, Heidi, and you responded, but I just wondered, we were talking, or those of us who share this tradition of Vedanta, we were talking about it from that perspective, and I was just wondering, Rumi wasn't a Vedantist, he was a Sufi. And so that's a very different thing indeed, from either Vedanta or Christianity. And I was just wondering how a committed and loving Christian like yourself might hear this poem.
I think it's a lovely poem.
Yeah, it is indeed a lovely poem. Well, it's 8:56, so we probably just have time to read this next poem a couple of times. Who'd like to read it? Liam, would you like to read this? It's Rigged. Have you got the book open?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I'll read it.
Okay, good.
It's rigged. It's rigged. Everything in your favor. So there's nothing to worry about. Is there some position you want? Some office? Some acclaim? Some award? Some con? Some lover? Maybe 2. Maybe 3. Maybe 4. All at once. Maybe a relationship with God. I know there is a gold mine in you. When you find it, the wonderment of the earth's gifts you will lay aside as naturally as does a child a doll. But, dear, how sweet you look to me kissing the unreal. Comfort. Fulfill yourself in any way possible. Do that until you ache. Until you ache. Then come to me again. It's rigged. It's rigged. Everything in your favor. So there's nothing to worry about. Is there some position you want? Some office? Some acclaim? Some award? Some con? Some lover? Maybe 2. Maybe 3. Maybe 4. All at once. Maybe a relationship with God. I know there is a gold mine in you. When you find it, the wonderment of the earth's gifts you will lay aside as naturally as does a child a doll. But, dear, how sweet you look to me kissing the unreal. Comfort. Fulfill yourself in any way possible. Do that until you ache. Until you ache. Then come to me again.
A great spiritual teacher, Sri Ramakrishna, was once approached by some gentlemen of the city of Calcutta, important people, who heard that he had been teaching their children renunciation. And they said to him, "Tell us, why should we not enjoy the world?" And he said, "Go, enjoy the world. I have no objection. But when you are sick of it, return to me. I have the cure. But when you are sick of it, return to me. I have the cure." I'm in class. So that's kind of the short form of the message of this poem, it seems to me. So without objection, we'll start with that next week. What do you think?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
I just wanted to say one thing that just the use of one word in this poem I find encouraging and inspiring, where he says, I know there is a gold mine in you. When you find it, the wonderment of the earth's gifts you will lay aside as naturally as does a child a doll. He didn't say if you find it, he
No,
said when you find it. And that is so encouraging.
indeed it is. Yes. And all of the great teachers encourage us in that way. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Thank you, Swayam. Anything else from anyone? Okay. Well, this was sweet. You know, we certainly did row through some deep waters tonight. Mhm. Rumi is well, these saints, you know, they're talking to us from a very special position, one of complete commitment and love to us. Every one of them says that. I've come to your door. I'm knocking on your door. Let me in. I can fix everything, Rumi says. Hafiz says that. The Catholic saints say that. St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila. Rabia said it. You know, I can heal anything. So they're listening to their words and taking them inside us is part of that when that Swayam was just talking about. Part of that when. We're very, very fortunate to be in their company and listening to them in this way. And he says, you know, when you find that gold mine, you'll lay aside earth's gifts as naturally as a child sets aside a doll. And of course, any of us who've been raised in the Christian tradition know the phrase, now it was in my mind and it slipped away. Well, when I was a child, now it slipped away again. Anyway, what it says is, when I was a child, I played with childish things, and when I became an adult, I set them aside. And it isn't. It's a natural thing. So, anything else from anyone before we say goodnight? Well, unless I'm mistaken, the next time we meet, it will be 2021. Won't that be a joy?
Yeah.
Somebody said they now that's gone out of my mind too. I guess I'm being preoccupied by the phone call I got. Sorry about that. So anything else? Anything else to be said by anyone? Okay. Well, may you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. May you have peace of mind. And may you go forward in the divine being's loving embrace. May that be how you experience these next few days, and for that matter, the rest of your life, but certainly until we meet again. Heidi, do you have any idea why June wasn't able to join us?
I don't. I haven't spoken to her in some days,
Okay.
since last Wednesday, actually.
Well, I'll be in contact with her to let her know we miss her and
Yeah.
hope that she's well. But if you talk to her, please do convey that message.
I certainly will, and I'm due to give her a call too, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay.
All right. Well, good night, everyone. Good night. Good night.
Good night. Thank you, everyone, and Happy New Year. Next time.
See
New Year.
You're all. Thank you. Thank you
Thank you,
very much.
everyone. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
And away we go.